settings to make sure that I'm public because at first it was only viewing to me. And okay, so I wanted to make sure people could see the live and see what's going on. It's been a minute. I don't know. I know Facebook has changed a lot of things as far as what's coming up in people's news feeds. I did notice that now every time I post, or like now I'm looking at my Facebook page and it says boost a post. So, everything is commercialized. We live in a capitalistic society. So they want you to boost your post, which means they want you to pay so that your post can be seen by more people. And no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to trust that the people who see it will see it and go from there because I know what we're doing here in Coldwater is important. And so, one thing I've learned is that consistency matters. Being consistent matters. And so, I'm not going to boost the post. Hopefully, people will come on and we can have a nice, robust conversation about Laurence Clifton Jones, the little professor of Piney Woods School. So, on my last broadcast, I talked about four beautiful mamas that started their own schools during the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were Lucy Craft Laney, Nanny Helen Burroughs, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Charlotte Hawkins Brown. And they were in North Carolina, Washington, D.C., think Augusta, Georgia, and Daytona Beach, Florida. And these mamas uh, had a standard of excellence. And I wanted to share about this Baba that I learned about a couple years ago. And so I announced that I would be sharing about Dr. Laurence Clifton Jones. So I was talking to a friend and I said, I'm supposed to do this book talk Monday, and I hadn't even started this book yet. This was probably last Tuesday. He was like, what is your book? What is it? Who is it? And I said, it's about the Baba Laurence Clifton Jones that started a boarding school in Rankin County, Mississippi, back in the early 1900s, very early 1900s. And he said, now, why are you doing it? I said, because we have to know what our ancestors did. We struggle so much in this society as Black people when it comes to our education. And we struggle so much when it comes to standards for our education and our excellence. And so I love to study the ancestors and the elders to learn what their methods were and what their standards were and what their expectations were during a time when access to everything was limited. And so I came across this Baba, like I said, a few years ago. My supervisor had attended a library conference and she picked up a novel, a book of fiction, and it was about a Black boarding school in current day. And she gave it to me. She said, I think you might be interested in this book. So I was like, okay, I haven't read it yet, but it did pique my interest about Black boarding schools. And so a quick Google search led me to four Black boarding schools that are still in operation. And imagine my surprise when I saw that one of them is in Mississippi. You know what people think about Mississippi when you tell them that you live in Mississippi or you're from Mississippi, the negativity that comes with that. But I'm going to tell you one thing I've learned since I've been here, that there's a resilience in the people here in Mississippi. And that's what I love. And I have met some beautiful souls on this journey. So when I learned about Piney Woods School and the man who founded it, there he's on the screen, Dr. Laurence Clifton Jones, I set out to find more information about him. And I came across a title of a book titled The Little Professor of Piney Woods. Okay. This was a book written by Beth Day. It was published in 1955. And so I knew, the author was probably a white woman. And so uh, when I started reading, some of the language in the book made me pause a bit. But then I remember who the author is, and I remember the time frame of which it was written. It was written in 1955. So at that time, we were still dealing with Jim Crow. We were still dealing with segregation and things of that nature. So I adapted my reading to the times, right? And so I do want to share a little bit. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I do want to share a little bit about Dr. Laurence Clifton Jones. He was born November 21st, 1882. So we just had Laurence Clifton Day last Tuesday. In fact, he shares the same day with one of my blood ancestors, Gwen Slade Franklin. So when I come upon people who share great people who share the same days with someone that I know personally, I tend to remember those dates. So he was born in St. Joseph, Missouri, and he worked to attend school because you got to remember during this time there was not free education for black folks, right? So he worked and he attended school. He went to the University of Iowa, which is really interesting because I think that's where Washington Carver attended. So I need to do some research on the University of Iowa and see why so many of our ancestors were drawn to that institution during this period, during this time frame. So he would go on to graduate, and then he was offered a position at Tuskegee down there in Alabama with the great Booker T. Washington, but he declined. He taught at, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Utica, which in Mississippi, it was an institute at that time, but now it's Hines Community College. And so if you know anything about Black institutions and HBCUs, you know that Mississippi has two uh historically black community colleges. One is Hines and the other is Coahoma over here in Cleveland, outside of Cleveland, between not Cleveland, sorry, Clarksdale. Well, it's kind of in between Cleveland and Clarksdale. So you have Coahoma Community College. But anyway, so Baba Lawrence taught there, and then he heard about a 80% illiteracy rate in Rankin County, Mississippi. And so I'm still learning the state. And so I looked up Rankin County, which I kind of knew where it was because if you go to Jackson, you will see the signs, entering Rankin County around the area. But Rankin County is really the home of Brandon, Mississippi, and Ridgeland, Mississippi, the areas around the Jackson, with some parts of Jackson, the metropolitan area, are considered to be in Rankin County and some in Hines County. So he learned about this 80% illiteracy rate in Rankin County, and Piney Woods comes from the geography of the region. So you have it was a lot of wooded area with pine trees and things of that nature. And so he set out on a mission to teach these people. So in the book, she uses the language of, he wanted to teach these backwoods people. I think I had more problems with the use of the word backwoods than I had with anything else because, backwoods will lend your mind to think about people who couldn't do anything. They just couldn't get their life together in any shape, form, or fashion. And for them to even have survived after emancipation was a testament that they could. So anyway, so he was set out to go in and teach these people how to function out of knowledge and not out of ignorance. And he used the word superstition a lot because I think when we learn about our history and we learn some of the things that we held on to, they weren't superstitions, they were traditions. And now, sometimes people would call it hoodoo or voodoo, but they were really our connection to nature. So they weren't, some of the things that we did and believed in were not silly superstitions. They were connections to nature. So, but he wanted to go in and he wanted to teach these people how to live, how to thrive off the land. Not only just the academics of reading and writing, but he wanted to teach them how to function in a more uh, substantial and way than they were already doing. So he taught the people. I love some of the dialogue that I actually do like the dialogue that she uses in the book when she is interpreting some of the conversations that were had. She used the dialogue. It kind of reminded me of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, the dialogue that was used in this book. So he would go in and he would talk to some of the people that lived in the woods, and they were supportive, but they just didn't feel like they had the resources to do this. Because remember, at this time, there was no public education for Black people. And if we wanted to learn and teach our children, we had to do it on our own dime. And so this was right after emancipation, and most of these people didn't have the means to support him economically. And so he had to think about that. So he would reach out to some of his friends in the North for funding. But he knew in the back of his mind that in order to get the funding that he needed to have something tangible, something that people could see, something that people could feel, something that people could touch, right? And that's one of the things that I have learned in this journey is that when it's just the idea, people will support you, we verbally, but financially is a whole nother story. And even when you have a standing building like we do here in Coldwater, it's still hard to get people to support you economically, even though they know what we need. It's just something that blocks us from actually doing the work. Greetings, Queen Tina. I'm happy you're here. I think you're the only one, but that's okay. I'm gonna keep going. Consistency matters, right? So we're talking about Baba Dr. Laurence Clifton Jones, who established the Piney Woods Institute Country Life School in Rankin County, Mississippi. So yeah, so what he wanted to do was teach these people that lived in the woods that did not have access to anything. He wanted to teach them about agriculture. He noticed that when he first came, a lot of people were saying, well, we really don't have anything because the boll weevil has destroyed our cotton crops. And so he noticed that a lot of the people grew only cotton, and that was what they depended on for their survival. To go to sell the cotton to the gin and get whatever they felt like giving it to them. And so he wanted to teach the people that there was more than the crop of cotton. He wanted the people to grow corn and grow other crops that could sustain them throughout the winter. And so he was really focused on agriculture and buying better seeds than people were buying because they tended to use the best and then try to plant the seeds that weren't usable. I mean, weren't they didn't plant the best, excuse me, they tended to sell and eat the best of their crops and use the discarded seeds to try to grow um, for the next year. He also had carpentry on his list, how to build things uh, efficiently and effectively, dairy farming, and construction. And so those were the four things that he wanted to focus on, as well as reading and writing. Um, so he would go and he would talk to people and they would support him. Yes, Queen, it is a book. It's the Little Professor of Piney Woods. I have a book I got from Thrift Books because it was published in 1955, so it's an old book. It doesn't have a dust jacket or a cover on it, but yeah, the Little Professor of Piney Woods. And I'm talking about the book is about the professor, and the woods people call him Fessor. So it's about Fessor Laurence Clifton Jones. And so he was discouraged one day after he had gotten a big no from some people. And he was sitting on a log out in the woods, and a young man came up to him and he asked him what was he doing and did he want to learn how to read and write. And the young man said yes. He said, okay, well, meet me here tomorrow. So the next day, this young man came and he brought three other young men with him. And they were up in age and they just wanted to learn how to read and write. And so that's how the school actually got started, outside on an old log. Um, and Professor, he had established a relationship with this white mill owner in the town of Braxton. And so he would go and he would talk to this guy, this man, and this man donated some wood so that he could build up some structures. And then in the meantime, formerly enslaved African named Ed Taylor heard about what he was wanting to do. He owned some land, and so he gave Baba Lawrence 40 acres, and it had a sheep shed on it. And so when the wood was donated, they basically fixed up the sheep shed, and they had some obstacles that came, but he was consistent and he was resilient and he kept going in spite of those obstacles. And so the school grew very quickly. Once people learned about the donations and they learned that he had this land and he was fixing up this sheep shed and he was going to build some more structures, people donated whatever they had. That was one thing that I loved about this story, that I loved about the foundation of how Piney Woods got started, was that these people didn't have much, but they sacrificed. Baba Laverne Murphy, uh, may peace be upon his soul, he told us that there's a difference between a donation and a sacrifice. A donation is giving something that you can afford. Like, I'm going to donate $10 a month to Ashe Academy because I can afford that. A sacrifice is giving up something that you need. And when you read this book, you will learn that these people they sacrificed because they didn't have a lot, but they knew that they wanted a better life. And a better life doesn't necessarily mean material things. A better life means having control of your own destiny, being able to feed yourself, being able to think for yourself. And so these people would donate. Uh, One man donated the use of his mule so that they could plow the land. Women donated their time and they cooked meals for the men. So when they worked, they would have access to food when they took their break and they had substance, right? People donated like crops, they donated jars of jelly, they donated chickens, they donated cows, and things of that nature. And this would go on throughout the years because they bartered for their children's education as well. So the way it became a boarding school is really interesting because when he was teaching these young men to read, he noticed that they were walking miles. People started walking miles to attend the school. So he thought, you know what? We have to make it where these people don't have to leave. They can just stay on site and learn on site. And then it can also give them the skills that we are trying to teach them. And once they're here learning, and they can take it when we have the break for the summer, they can take it back to their communities and teach the people there. And so that's what happened. And so every time they would have the opening day, the students would come and they would bring whatever they had. They bartered for their children's education. Imagine that. Imagine that. And so that 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 is what I enjoy so much about the book, as I stated previously. It was that it gave a sense of community. It gave a sense of really valuing the education that they were given. Because let me tell you, just like when I talked last month about the four mamas, there was more than academics in these institutions that our ancestors founded and kept going. There was way more than academics. There was a sense of character. There was a sense of pride. These students had great self-confidence and self-esteem, be they because they were being taught by people who loved them and people who cared about them and people who wanted them to make a difference in the Black community. And so, once everything was desegregated, we lost that. We lost that sense of community. We lost that sense of our teachers and educators caring about our welfare. And so this book just brought all that back out to me. And it made me proud and it made me understand why Ashe Academy is needed. That's what I was telling my friend when he asked, why do you read these books? Why do you care? Why do you talk about them? I read because I want to be grounded, encouraged, and inspired. And I want us to get back to that real Black excellence, not this manufactured stuff that when we get a pat on the back from white folk. I want us to get back to the real Black excellence that it had all of us in there, right? Not just a few, but everybody um, got to benefit from the Black excellence. So, yeah, so Piney Woods, when you read his story, it kind of puts you in the mind of Booker T. Washington. And a lot of times when we talk about people like him and Booker T. Washington, we judge them through our desegregated, assimilated eyes. And I hate that we do that because you got to remember the times that these babas and those mamas were working in. You got to remember the economic status of most of our people. How were they going to be funded? In 1955, I'm sorry, excuse me, in the early 1900s, in the 1930s, in the 1940s, it took at least $100,000 to maintain the school a year. $100,000. Remember, this is a boarding school, so they had to have food, they had to have the shelter, they had to have clothing, they have to have supplies, they had to pay people, even though the teachers had a meager salary. $100,000. Now, if most of our people in the South were still sharecropping and living under the extremes of Jim Crow, do you think our people had $100,000? So every summer, Bobby Clifton, and then once he got married to let me find her name because she was a beautiful soul in the book. I didn't write her name down. But she once he got married to Grace Morris Allen, they would take the summers and go fundraising for their school. They would go to the north. They would go to anybody who would listen. They would take pennies, nickels, dimes, dollars, checks, whatever to fund their school. And that's to be admired because those those were some blatant hostile times. We still living in those times, don't get it twisted, but those were even more so than what we experience to this day. So they had to be creative in their approach. And one of the creative ideas and one of the most hold on, Mackenzie, stop. You see I'm doing this. Excuse me. I don't know why tonight she wants to keep on coming in the camera. But anyway, so they had to be creative in their approach. They were using that Kuumba. Kwanzaa's coming up, creativity. So they used their Kuumba to come up with effective fundraising. And one thing that they noticed about their students was that they all could sing. All of them could sing. And so they began to put together ensembles and they put together a quartet and they were called the Cotton Blossom Singers. And they would travel the country and entertain people and raise funds for the school. And so the students, after they sang, they would tell their stories and their experiences at Piney Woods, and this was became to be a valuable way for them to raise funds. They also housed the Mississippi School for the Black and for the Mississippi Blind School for Negroes. And this school was housed at Piney Ridge for 40 years. 40 years. Mama Martha Louise Murrow Fox was the principal. She herself had a sight impediment. She was partially blind, but she was the principal of this portion of the school. And then in 1945, Helen Keller. Now everybody knows who Helen Keller is, right? We don't know who Mama Martha is, but we damn sure know who Helen Keller is. But anyway, Helen Keller came to visit, and it prompted her to go before the state legislator to solicit funds to build an actual structure for the blind and the deaf. And so they did. And so once that building um, was erected in Jackson, Mama Martha would move over there and become the principal and the administrator of that school. So Piney Ridge, Piney Woods was more than just a school, it was a community. uh, when we talk about the Cotton Blossom Singers and we talk about the Mississippi Blind School for Negroes, both of them had quartets, both of them did concerts. But get this, I went down a rabbit hole because that's what I like to do when I learn about these people. I went down the rabbit hole and I learned that the Cotton Blossom Singers would go on to become the nucleus of the five blind boys of Mississippi. Now, if you're around my age or a little bit older, we definitely know who they are, right? You know who the Five Blind Boys is, a gospel group. And so they were birthed here at Piney Woods Country Life School. So I thought that was really interesting. And then there's a story in the book about a little girl who did not, she was an orphan. She would just walked up to the school and she wanted to uh, become a student, but she was very young. So Baba Lawrence and Mama uh, Grace took her in, and she would become the mother of Kathy Hughes. Kathy Hughes is the sister who owned TV1. So all these people were connected to Piney Woods Country Life School. Just a phenomenal story of 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 sticking to it, tenacity, resilience, dedication. Baba Lawrence was so dedicated to these people in Piney Woods and in the rural areas of Mississippi. They didn't turn down anyone. His wife, he had met her some years prior and he remembered her. He went back up to Iowa, he found her and they got married, and she came and she worked just as hard as he did at the school. She was a great fundraiser. She was a great English teacher, but then she got sick. She had pneumonia and she died, transitioned from the complications of pneumonia. And it was, and then they realized just how much she was doing. They said when it all came down to it, they had to have 6 people to replace her in everything that she was doing at Piney Woods. Phenomenal, phenomenal. And sometimes I find myself wearing many hats to do what I do. But he said something. There's a quote by him at the end of the book, and I felt that with everything in me because that's how I feel. I often tell people all the time, "You depressed? Are you depressed? Get involved with the youth. Get involved with helping raise up the next generation." He said, "Devote yourself to a worthy task. You can't fail to have a worthy life. When you devote yourself to a worthy task, you can't fail to have a worthy life." And that I felt, right? So I do want to close now, but I wanted to read a passage at the end of the book in chapter 22 because it's just a summary of everything that Piney Woods Country Life School did for their students. So it's a summary basically of Piney Woods School. Okay. So remember, this was written in 1955, and in page 183 it says, Two-thirds of the students and all of the faculty live on the campus in dormitories and cottages that are part of the modern $750,000 school plant. It has its own second class post office operated by postmistress Nellie Jones Bass, who has remained at the school most of her life, with the exception of a business course in Iowa, and whose husband, a Piney Woods graduate, is a captain in the regular army, and whose daughter is now working on her doctorate at Columbia University preparatory to returning to Piney Woods. So a lot of these people would come back to Piney Woods, and a lot of these people would take things back to their communities, teaching people how to farm, teaching people how to sew, how to cook certain things. So yeah, we got to get back to that, right? Second paragraph. Clothes are cleaned in the campus cleaning plant, one of the trade courses offered for boys. Washing, sewing, and ironing are done in the girls' classrooms. Maintenance on all buildings is done by student labor in the school's 1,600 acres, with its modern dairy, orchards, truck, and general farms. Produce 60% of all food consumed. They produce 60% of all of the food consumed. So, it was self sufficient in a way. 40 gallons of milk in the morning and 30 at night are separated. The cream churned into butter with a yield of 75 to 100 pounds a week. Pitchers of fresh buttermilk and sweet milk are on the students' tables each meal, and they are free to drink what they want. Chickens furnish a good supply of eggs and an occasional Sunday dinner. Meat comes from the butchering of pigs and cattle from the school droves and herds. Homemade syrup is made right on the campus from the school's own cane, and a grist mill grinds its corn as well as that of neighboring farms into meal. Girls are taught pressure cooking canning for both fruits and vegetables, and more than 20,000 quarts of both fruit and vegetables are put up each year. And so, it's funny because we talk a lot about what we need to be doing, how we need to be teaching, and things of that nature. And we have access to more resources, we have access to more land, we have access to more information. Yet, these people did way more with so much less than we do with so much more. And so, I just wanted to share Bible with you. I wanted to share the story of Piney Woods with you because it was so inspiring to me. You know, I don't know what it is going to take for us to realize that we have everything. We have been equipped. Our ancestors did it. We can do it too. We can do it even more effectively and efficiently than our ancestors did. They had to battle the elements. They had to battle hostility. They had to battle so much that we won't even have, we had to do some of it, but we won't have to do as much, right? There will be some battles, of course. But when I think about these people, and I think about Booker T. Washington, and he was like, you don't have to bring anything. You don't even have to bring your underwear because we make those here. We make our own clothes. We make our own bricks. We plant our own food. It said they grew 60% of everything that they needed. And then they learned how to can. So they would have food throughout the winter. What we do? What we do if the grocery store closed down? We think what we got is so much better and we know so much more. Do we really? Can we survive if everything's shut down? Man, I'm telling you, read the stories of our ancestors and our elders and get yourself grounded. Be encouraged and be inspired. Um, I just keep on talking about how, a lot of us tend to judge these people through our desegregated, assimilated eyes. instead of looking at what they did. Yeah, mistakes were made. Hell, we making them now too. But we learn from those mistakes and we evolve and we move forward. But these people had standards of excellence that we don't even have no idea. We had no idea how to even create those because we so assimilated. A lot of times when I tell people about Ashe Academy, I know that we don't have the numbers and people don't quote respect it because, it ain't comparable to what they got out there. But hell, our experience ain't comparable either. And we got to start working and teaching and building based on our experiences, not someone else's. So yeah. Greetings, Sister Mila. Greeting, Brother Amoon. Yeah, I'm just about to end it, but I was talking tonight about the little professor of Piney Woods, Baba Dr. Laurence Clifton Jones, and the school he started down in Rankin County, Mississippi, that I just learned about a few years ago. And so I was on a mission to find out more about this man. And so in my description, I wrote at one point there were over 100 Black boarding schools. In fact, last month, I talked about one of the mamas who had a boarding school, Charlotte Hawkins Brown. And the standards of excellence that she had for her students. A lot of times, when you read these books, and people will often think, well, what did they do about the students who acted up, who cut up? They really didn't have many because these students knew, especially at Piney Woods, a lot of them didn't have anywhere to go. And so they wanted to come and they wanted to learn. And when they did learn, they would take their skills back to their communities and back to their families and back to the people to show them how to sew, to show them how to clean, to show them how to cook, to show them how to can, to show them how to grow food besides other things besides cotton and corn. So, I was just fascinated by the story because not knowing of these people is a testament of our miseducation, right? Of course, we know about Booker T. Washington, but this boarding school right here in the woods of Mississippi, uh, that I was fascinated. But yeah, there were over 100 schools, and then desegregation happened. I don't say integration because when you look and you study desegregation, you would say, oh, yeah, we did desegregate because desegregate means just blending us in. Integration meant bringing our story too, hiring our teachers. How many Black teachers and administrators lost their jobs when these schools were desegregated. And so once desegregation happened, a lot of these boarding schools had to close their doors because, the funding went away as well. So it's amazing that this school right here in Mississippi is still operating to this day. In fact, y'all know I work at a community college, and I was looking at the basketball schedule last year, and they played Piney Woods. And so I was like, wow, now I know what Piney Woods is. I was like kind of laughing about that. But yeah, so when I learned, that proverb says, when one teaches, two learn. So I love to share the information about our greatness with you all so that you all can be inspired and encouraged as well. And that, we can begin the process of instituting and building our own institutions again, because that is the only way that we're going to be educated in a manner that is conducive to our survival. For real. So and when you look at the lessons and you look at the academics and you look at the structure of all of these schools, all of these institutions, they were very rigorous. And today We probably would pass out if we had to do some of the things that our ancestors and elders did. But it helped shape them, and it helped build them, and it gave us a foundation now that we can stand on. So and you look at it and you think, man, we've been dumbed down. That's how I felt, especially when I read um uh can't think of her name, Coppin Jackson, Fanny Jackson Coppin's story. And I looked at some of the lessons that they taught the students. I'm like, damn, we've been dumbed down. Especially when it came to the math and English. We've been dumbed down. And so when you look at this and you think about everything, you're like, damn, we got to get back. We got to get back to where we were. There were standards of excellence. It wasn't where we are now. Now the expectations are so low that when you do have a good student, when you do have a black student who, quote, has got accepted to every Ivy League, we celebrate those exceptions. We celebrate the exceptions so much that we overlook the fact that all of our students should be excelling at that rate. I believe in us. Do you? Do you believe in us? Do we believe in us as a collective? I believe Laurence Clifton Jones believed in every child and adult that came to Piney Woods. They didn't turn away anyone. It didn't matter if they had a disability. It didn't matter if they had a bad attitude. They worked with them children and those adults until they established a relationship and made them productive. There was one story in here about a young man that came to Piney Woods, and Baba Clifton recognized right away that he was very gifted. And so he solicited some friends of his northern friends and got this young man in college up there. And then, but the young man came back and he became the president of Alcorn. And so there's stories kind of like that throughout the book. This man was great. Uh, there were some things that now we would consider coonish, and sometimes I would cringe because. But then I remembered the author. I had to remember. I had to constantly say, okay, you know what? This was written by a white lady, so of course she's gonna endear white people and make it seem like things weren't possible without them. Blah, blah. So you have to kind of read it with a grain of salt, but then you still are amorous of this great Baba and everything he did. But anyway, I'm gonna end here. Y'all go back and look at everything that I said prior, because I do think that once you know the story, once you learn about this Baba, you will be inspired as well, and you will understand why I'm so passionate. Why people on this live, Sister Mila, Brother Moon, Sister Mary, Sister Tina, why we are so passionate about what it is that we do. Liberation. Why we're so passionate. Because we know what we had and we know what happened and we know what we got to do. So I thank y'all for tuning in. I'm going to get out of here because y'all saw Kenzie. She's here with me and I don't know what she on tonight, but we going to solve that problem when I get off here. But anyway, I'll be back next month. So December, y'all know, I love Kwanzaa. I feel how you want about the politics of it, how it was founded and things of that nature, but I just love the principles. I love the symbols. I love what it stands for. Uh, we don't want to be so quick to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We unless we got something else, we gonna stand by Emoja. We're gonna stand by Kuji Chagalia. We're gonna stand by all those principles. I am. So we are going to be celebrating Kwanzaa. And then I also wanted to talk next month about another great ancestor and educator, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, because next month is his birth month, December. And I usually talk about him in December and in February because of his legacy. But there's a book I know it's on audiobook because I listened to it some last year. If you have a public library card and your library has Hoopla, or I forget what the other one is, uh, get this book, Fugitive Pedagogy by Jarvis Gibbons. And the art is Fugitive Pedagogy, the art of Carter G. Woodson and the Art of Black Teaching by Jarvis Gibbons. It's excellent. It gives a thorough history and analysis of Carter G. Woodson, um, what happened to make his thought process change, and understand that our stories matter. There's something in there. He says it took him 20 years to undo the training and education that he got in these institutions that he attended. 20 years. So imagine us now, with that being most of all we knew was, desegregated schools that we went to. So yeah. So anyway, I'll be talking a little bit about that next month. The Art of Black Teaching, Fugitive Pedagogy. Greetings, Sister Akusi. It's good to see you. Can't wait till the weekend. But anyway, y'all have a great rest of the evening. Thank y'all for tuning in. I really do appreciate the love and support. And until next time, peace and Black power.